What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Pro Football Focus show here on Rotogrinders. I'm Stevie TPFL, and I'm joined by my good buddy Ian Hartitz. How are you doing, my friend?
Happy week 13, man. Had a different troubled Thanksgiving thrown wrench in the week last week, but now I don't even know what day it was yesterday without Thursday night football. Got a full freaking slate of Sunday games, two bye weeks, whatever. A lot of interesting options here, man. We were talking a little bit before the show about just lineup filling out and what we're kind of trying to squeeze in. I don't think there's really a huge free square, but maybe we got some other guys with some injuries shaking out. Great day to be great. Let's do it, man.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we had so much last week. We did the show and like so much news came out on Saturday, and I feel like it could be the same this week. It's crazy. Like it wouldn't be 2020 if we didn't have a ton of news each and every football week. But I think one of the things too, like people just kind of underrate is like paying attention to like defensive injuries too. We've seen a lot of difference made this year. So Ian, you said it, man. Week 13, like we're already like it's almost playoff time, dude.
Almost playoff time, man. We got to, got to try figuring out these teams here. Moving on out. I know the Buccaneers are on a bye, but you look at their kind of rest of season schedule. They could be entering the playoffs hot. Like these last 5 weeks are going to make a lot of difference, I think, in terms of who we're feeling good about. Everyone knows the Chiefs are, the heavy favorite in the AFC, man. But you look at the NFC, I think it's more muddled than it really has been in past years. Packers, Seahawks, Saints, Buccaneers. There's a lot of teams you can talk yourself into coming out of there. I think it's also a good conversation as to are the Steelers really the biggest threat to the Chiefs, or could it be the Titans, or hell, even the Browns? So a lot of good matchups this week, and of course, a lot of fancy situations we want to take advantage of.
Well, each and every week over there on Pro Football Focus, you write the mismatch manifesto. I found it interesting. I read it earlier this morning, and there was something that I definitely wanted to talk to you, and we're gonna get like right into it right away here. You start with the explosive plays, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Like when you're looking at like explosive like pass plays, you mentioned like the Vikings, the Texans, and the Packers. Like, do you think the Texans potentially take a hit here without Will Fuller? Like, I'm starting you off like hot right out of the gun here.
No, it's a fair question, man. That's the thing with a lot of these like matchups. I am not taking, super small sample sizes from, Taysom Hill being under center versus Drew Brees. I'm just taking the Saints all year long. So yeah, when we see the Houston Texans and the Vikings really popping off this week as having the best explosive play matchups through the air. Yeah, we do need to consider what life is going to be like without Will Fuller. And you look at the splits with Deshaun Watson over the years, they have not been good with Will Fuller on and off the field. I will say that having someone like Brandon Cooks out there helps, because Brandon Cooks, you look at Tom Brady, you look at Drew Brees, Jared Goff, and even Deshaun Watson, every quarterback that Brandon Cooks has ever played with has averaged more yards per attempt with him on the field versus without. So something has to give here. It's either going to be the Fuller splits or the Brandon Cook splits. One of those are going to fall off. Ultimately, I think Deshaun Watson is still such a he's been playing the best football of his career this year, even without having DeAndre Hopkins. I think a lot of that has been, accepting that, hey, you can play through, what your offense is kind of designed to do. He's one of those guys like Russell Wilson, where sometimes you see them press a little bit too much, try to make too much happen on their own, because they can a lot of the time, but learning when to rein that in and when to deploy it, in the right times. I think Watson's been better than ever at doing that this year. Look, Colts defense, like we all know that they're a great unit, but okay, we've seen some of these better passing attacks, Titans a couple weeks ago, Packers, Lions. There's a not small amount of quarterbacks that have gone for 300 plus and 3 scores against this defense. Watson, I think he's a GPP play this week because it's going to cost a lot to get up there, but no, I think he's still going to be putting up top 5, top 6 numbers at the position with or without Will Fuller.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Vikings, Adam Thielen, back off the COVID list. They're going to be full go here in this great matchup against Jacksonville. You have them as like the highest explosive play potential here. So is there anything else that you wanted to talk about as far as like explosive plays, or do we want to move on?
Yeah, real quick, 3 guys stand out that could be really struggling through the air. Brandon Allen and the Bengals. I cannot stress how bad this Bengals team looked last week. I know it was very close against the Giants, but the Bengals had a kick return for a touchdown. Then the only reason they were in position at the end was because after getting this, mop-up touchdown drive against prevent defense, finally after the Giants got a 2-score lead, we see Alex freaking Erickson get them a punt return back in the 50. So it was like setting up to be the most just like bad win that we'd ever seen for, the Bengals. But because it's still Brandon Allen, he had a strip sack fumble to just immediately end the game. So I really think this Bengals team without Joe Burrow is the single worst team in the entire league. You have I understand that it's not too big of a stretch to say that because, hey, they had the number 1 overall pick last year. But truly, like, I would take the Jets over the Bengals on neutral field right now. Also, Carson Wentz, we all know he's been sucking up. But Kyler Murray, this is a tough spot, man. And we got to adjust to life right now with him not running. Since he suffered that shoulder injury, only 10 total rush attempts. Kyler, very good thrower of the ball. We're not, discounting that or anything. But similar to Alvin Kamara, like when you take away his targets, when you take away Kyler's rushing ability, all of a sudden we're looking at a much more ordinary fantasy football prospect than we were before.
I guess like we can just kind of transition into pace, as we talk about Kyler Murray, because I feel like when you're looking at the slate as a whole, we're not seeing as much love for the Rams-Cardinals game as we probably should. Yeah, I know we have a lot of great games on the slate with a lot of high totals, a lot of spots for DFS, but like Ian, you talk about it in your article. This is the game that like really stands out pace-wise, like really stands out.
Yeah, and that's the tricky part because, we've seen the heights that Kyler and, Hopkins can get to. And it wouldn't be shocking if, hey, we look back at this 2-week stretch of, just small rush attempts and ends up being nothing more than a blip on the radar. There's a game, a couple of weeks ago where Lamar Jackson only had 3 rush attempts. And we're all wondering, oh, is he, just no longer rushing? Next week he had, 10 plus carries. So it is a small sample size we're digging into. Kyler has been, a full participant in practice throughout this week with the shoulder injuries. So it's interesting, man, because, yeah, there are going to be plays going all over the place. And you see, that Rams with Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, I believe both under 6K or pretty close to it. Very affordable game stack potential. So, not something I'm looking for in cash games necessarily. But to your point, might be a good way to go against the grain, get some GPP goodness there. I will say the Bills, 49ers, and the Jaguars, Vikings are really standing out as slow-paced one. These Viking games, it's just always tough to kind of get a handle on, man, because we've seen, like, Kirk Cousins is actually having the best year of his career in most efficiency metrics. The problem is, every freaking 4 or 5 weeks, we see one of these games where Dalvin Cook goes nuclear and then Cousins has to make do with, literally like 15 or 20 pass attempts. So if they can just overcome that in these limited amount of plays, okay, he can put up numbers and he's in a great matchup to do so. It's just concerning with volume more so in Minnesota than pretty much anywhere else.
Yeah, I think the Cleveland, Tennessee, the Patriots, Chargers, like those are the games that kind of stand out on the positive side, right?
Yeah.
Like we talked about the Rams and Cardinals. Obviously, that game stands out from a pace standpoint, but I think that like Cleveland and Tennessee is definitely getting some love, but the Patriots and Chargers, people are still so caught up on what the Patriots defense used to be and instead of what they are this year. So like that game, it's probably my favorite game on the entire slate.
I like that call. I mean, Cam Newton, you look at just the cheapest kind of quarterback you can somewhat trust. I think it's him. And yeah, it's been an up and down season. I understand, last week, I believe he was apologizing to McDaniels after getting the win or whatever it was. It might be a couple weeks ago. But either way, I know it hasn't been, a perfectly great season for Cam Newton, but we have seen, more good than bad out of the passing game. He's always a threat to pound one in on the ground. So I like that call. We know Herbert and Keenan and those guys can always put up points, especially with our guy, Austin Eckler, getting 14 targets back, man. He's going to be one of the higher run running backs on the slate for sure.
Let's look at the pressure situations here. You kind of already talked about like Brandon Allen and that Cincinnati offense. Not getting much better for them here against Miami.
Yeah, a couple other guys is looking rough for. Matt Ryan against the Saints. Dude, since the Saints have come back from bye, only the Rams have been better at EPA allowed per play. I mean, this Saints defense really coming into form, and it's wild because, like, for me, like a month ago, I was kind of in on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, potentially making a Super Bowl run. They were getting Antonio Brown back, but the big reason was, I just thought, hey, this is looks like the best team in the NFC at having an elite offense paired with an elite defense. Now that Buccaneers defense looks a hell of a lot more, exploitable, whereas the Saints are the ones looking great. So even taking away, their game against the practice squad wide receiver last week, they've been playing really great football on that side of the ball for the last month. And with Julio Jones looking pretty iffy, it's a situation where I would love to kind of bet against Taysom Hill keeping this hot streak going. But as long as Julio is going to remain out, I think it's going to be tough for Atlanta to be really moving the ball with all that much of efficiency. Drew Lock against the Chiefs going to be a long afternoon. I think we all knew that. Then Alex Smith against the Steelers, always a tough one there. I will say there's a couple guys standing out that do have a chance to have all day to throw, and that's Roethlisberger against the Washington football team. Good pass rush, but that dude just gets the ball out so quick. I mean, we almost see them playing like ball control with their passing game, the amount of short, receptions that Deontay and these guys can get. I like the potential for a bounce back spot from Deontay Johnson. Just such a weird Wednesday night game, man. I think he's still, a solid candidate to get 10 plus targets during any given week. Also seeing Phillip Rivers versus the Texans. I mean, look, this is a game where, again, if you want to maybe go with Deshaun Watson and some GPPs, you can definitely wind it back with guys like Michael Pittman, T.Y. Hilton, and just some of those cheaper price wide receivers. Because even if Phillip Rivers doesn't always look the prettiest, shot putting the ball across the field as he kind of does with that, flick of his wrist, I do think that, he's been efficient throughout the year in this Houston Texans defense. Now you take away Bradley Roby, is even going to be in a worse position than usual. So a couple guys should have all day. And also, I'd say Baker Mayfield, to your point about this Browns-Titans game potentially looking good from just a stacking perspective. I think people put too much flack on Baker Mayfield for this passing game over the past kind of month, because before last week, and last week, he had that awful miss to Rashard Higgins. I understand that. We all saw the play. We all laughed about it. Otherwise, I thought it was one of the best games he played of the year, one rope after another. And literally the 3 weeks before that were all bad weather games in Cleveland with all sorts of wind and rain. So I'm not saying this is going to be a great passing offense in the post-OBJ era, but at a minimum, against this Titans defense with Baker projecting to have plenty of time, I can see Jarvis Landry and company staying hot.
And so you pair it, right? So we talked about the pace. Now we have a good matchup for Baker Mayfield. You gotta pair some of these things together. What stands out multiple in situations. So, and you talked about the weather. A couple other people this week have talked about how bad the weather has been for Baker Mayfield this season, but it's true, and that's something that you won't see. You're not going to see that on stat sheets or data that you look at. You just have to kind of know, man. You have to know that he had 3 really, really windy games. One of those games, it was crazy to watch that one. So the trench battles.
Man. Yeah, I would say real quick, it's tough for some of these on-off splits because sometimes I get it. You look at Matt Ryan with and without Julio Jones, pretty clear that when you take an all-world talent off the field like Julio and you look at the Falcons' backup wide receivers, I'm willing to buy into that narrative. But I keep hearing this Josh Allen with and without John Brown thing. We just need to be careful where we're drawing the line because Josh Allen has had great games with and without John Brown this year. And people, they look at that, week 3, week 4 game where they played the Rams. John Brown played less than a half time's worth of play, only had 2 targets, didn't catch any of them. Josh Allen goes for 300 plus yards and 4 touchdowns against them. So it's already a 16 game sample size, and we're not even at 16 yet. It's such a small sample size. Be really careful if you're, picking and choosing these random games to make these big statements about. To your point, all these are a piece of the puzzle. Don't let one piece of information, particularly if you're using these small on-off sample sizes, completely sway your opinion on some of this.
Yeah, especially, man, at some point you're just I just gotta take some shots too, especially in tournaments. We talked about Jarvis Landry on the show last week, and he had a monster game. So you just gotta take shots every once in a while. The trenches battle this week, I think this week is super interesting when it comes to the run in general, but let's talk about it from a numbers standpoint. What are we looking at in the trenches this week?
Yeah, 3 main kind of situations stand out to me. The Patriots against the Chargers set up really well. Best, combined yards before contact on the main slate. And you look at what happened last week, not having Rex Burkhead. Well, I was out here touting James White on this show. Now, was I touting James White because I thought he was going to get 2 goal line rushing touchdowns? No, of course not. I was hoping he'd get the target share, which didn't come. But the big takeaway from that game was Damian Harris and James White splitting backfield duties. We can live with 2 back committees. Usually in New England, it's 3 or 4. Now that we have James White and Damian Harris as the featured 1A, 1B backs, it's tough to tell how these games are going to go. And I understand, it's a situation where we don't want to really stack them. It's either going to be a Damian Harris game or a James White game, probably not both. But I think, tossing out both these guys in stacks with Cam, you could find your way getting the majority of a Patriots, offensive touchdowns and a potential high scoring game. And then also Saints versus the Falcons. Look, Taysom Hill, I had an article go up on PFF.com today where I talked about his impact on Alvin Kamara and this offense as a whole. The Saints offense has still been an above average offense in terms of EPA per play with Taysom Hill under center. The difference is their passing efficiency has fallen off a cliff. Their rushing efficiency has really spiked. I mean, Taysom Hill has been good for the Saints run game. The problem is that difference hasn't made up for the, big difference in passing difference. So as I said before, I mean, the Saints defense has really been what's carrying them as of late. But with that said, man, Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara is sitting there at 7K now. Everyone's going to be on Austin Eckler. I understand the Kamara is not getting the targets. It's incredibly frustrating. We we can't treat him as the top 3 option, but that doesn't mean the guy can't find the end zone a few times, particularly in a matchup against the Falcons that we've seen him crush in the past. So yeah, it's been incredibly frustrating the last 2 weeks. There's a reason why Kamara is no longer, priced in the 8-9K range. But I do think, when you look at the ownership projections with Eckler, just again, being chalky as all hell, if something doesn't work out with him, pivoting to Kamara, getting a good game could be the nice contrarian tournament move. Last point I would make is Miles Sanders against the Packers. Another guy is just, he's been disappointing a little bit lately, but this Packers defense has been a godsend, a get right spot for some of these running backs throughout the league. So Sanders is someone that we know he has that, big hitter, 80-yard touchdown type play in his repertoire. Hasn't been there lately. This whole Eagles offense has been a disaster. I get it. But if anyone's going to help him get out of this funk on the ground, I think it could be the Packers defense.
I appreciate you totally jinxing Sonny Michel's 15 touches. He's going to have now.
No problem.
The passing game this week, what's kind of standing out for you as far as the passing game goes?
Sorry, say that again.
The passing game, what's standing out to you as far as the passing game goes?
Yeah, looking at just total passing yards per drop back. There's a couple of situations where, again, we just see these efficient quarterbacks in good matchups. Kirk Cousins against the Jaguars really looking good. Phillip Rivers against the Texans, and even Derek Carr against the Jets. Man, don't let one awful performance by his Raiders offense throw us off the fact that they've been pretty damn good most of this year. 3 straight games before last week, the Raiders scored at least 30 points. And I have nothing good to say about what they did against the Falcons. Just realize, now facing this Jets team, you're flying across the country, but it's as great of a get right spot as we could have hoped for, just in terms of, total matchups on that side of the ball. So the Jets are one of these teams that we have seen. When they played the Chiefs, I think Greg Williams still walks in there and is like, guys, first and foremost, we need to stop the run above all else, just old football guy mentality. And because of that, when they play some of these smarter offenses like the Chiefs, I think the Raiders even qualified. John Gruden does a lot of good things from a play calling perspective, but they played the Chiefs, and Mahomes literally had 45 pass attempts in the first 3 quarters of that game. They were just begging them to air it out. And because of that, I think we're going to see a similar defensive strategy, and we could see Carr, Darren Waller, Nelson Aguilar, all these stacks that burnt us last week actually come to fruition in this one. So we got to check on Josh Jacobs with this ankle injury. He hasn't been practicing. It's not looking too good for him. But, you take him out of the picture, I think it makes sense to embrace a little bit more of a pass-happy attack. So Devontae Booker will probably be pretty chalky. But even then, man, David Montgomery seems to be taking most of the ownership from that range. So I like the thoughts of going back to the Raiders here in this get-right spot.
I'll finish it out here with EPA. If you guys want to read this whole article, it's over there on ProFootballFocus.pff.com. Finish this out with EPA, Ian.
Yeah, just have some good trends here. Generally, we've seen just some higher scoring games when both offenses have combined EPA per play. Again, it was a nice trend earlier in the year where we could literally just bet on both the positive offenses, bet the over in that game, and it was crushing it. But as QBs change, as weather comes and impacts it, obviously none of these are a single standalone value. But the games that are popping out is truly just having really good offenses on both sides of the ball. Should be able to move it. Browns, Titans, Colts, Texans, and then also to a lesser extent, Patriots and the Chargers. So really the Titans, the Vikings, and the Chiefs stand out as the top 3 offenses just in terms of absolutely being able to move the ball. On the other hand, the Bengals, the Broncos, the football team, and the Cowboys as well should really have a lot of problem really instilling their will on the offensive side of the ball.
We're going to be showing a lot of screen share stuff here, Lineup HQ, Gridiron IQ. If you guys haven't already, make sure you check out the Core 4 premium subscription here at Rotogrinders. Rotogrinders.com/media/PFF. You get $5 off your first month. Take advantage of that. We got NFL going, NBA coming up at the end of the month. You were talking about the running backs as far as the Patriots running backs and how you don't want to play them together. You can easily make a group in Lineup HQ to make sure you don't play those 2 guys together. So, Ian, let's talk some bets. What's standing out to you this week as your favorite bets?
Yeah, I got a couple ones I'm a big fan of here. Browns +6. We've been talking about. I've seen it at +5.5 a little bit too. So maybe get that extra half point to get up to 6. I just think you're bringing Myles Garrett back to the picture. Baker Mayfield. Again, we've talked about these weather games. We kind of broke down the situation before, but the Titans defense, okay, they've been mediocre at best all year long. This is not the type of squad I expect to really slow down Mayfield in this passing game, and they've proven they can run the ball on absolutely anybody. So I don't know if Cleveland wins, but at a minimum, again, we're seeing this EPA per play. Brown should be able to move the ball ball. I think both offenses can move the ball, so maybe the over is a play as well. Just a little worry about how many plays there's going to be to go around, with so much running potentially involved. But either way, 6 points seems far too much for a Browns team that, hey, we got to give them credit at some point, even if they're not, the legit contender because of Baker Mayfield. I still think this is a matchup that they can get up for and keep closer than 6 points. Bills 49ers, man, surprising me to see this as a pick 'em. And I understand the 49ers, coming off that solid win over the Rams, but man, I just feel like they have Jared Goff's number to some extent out here. And we look at this 49ers defense. They came in off the bye. They got Richard Sherman back. That's great. But you look before then, 27 points allowed to the Saints, 34 against the Packers, 37 against the Seahawks. Like, they shut down the Patriots and the Rams. Other than that, they've allowed, 27 plus points in freaking 5 of their last 6 or 7 games or so. So I really think that, without having Bosa, without having, some of their other just monsters on the defensive line still. Like, Sherman's great, but adding one cornerback back to the equation, I don't think it's going to offset what Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills, have been able to do throughout this year. Mentioned before, I think these John Brown splits are fluky. I think we've seen Josh have bad games, with John Brown and without John Brown. So obviously having someone like Smokey Brown back in the picture will be better for the offense. And we've seen good things from Gabriel Davis all year long. Obviously Stephon Diggs and Cole Beasley, I think we'd all agree are better real life receivers than Smokey Brown anyway. So seeing this one as a pick 'em, hey, it's not ideal. You're going from Buffalo all the way, or is it this game? Yeah, this game is in San Fran. Not ideal going all the way to San Francisco. I understand it. You got that going for us. But I just think with Nick Mullins under center, like, there's an awfully low floor for this 49ers offense and defense that we've seen. And the Bills, similar to the Browns, like, I think people are just hesitant to come around on them as a legit solid football squad. So give me the Bills at this, pretty much being a pick 'em or 1 point. And then finally, Dolphins 11.5. Again, I truly think the Bengals are the worst team in the National Football League right now. And the fact that we got Fitzpatrick seemingly starting under center is huge. I understand why the Dolphins will put Tua under center. They should figure out if he is your future or not, because you're going to have this pretty high draft pick from the Houston Texans next year. Maybe you could even trade up and go get your guy if you don't think it's Tua. But there is no debate in my mind about who gives them a better chance to win, big than Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's been an above average quarterback all year long, man. When Tua's been in there, it's really been rough. They've had to rely on their defense, but with Fitz back there against a Bengals defense, particularly, that is already mediocre, and now they're getting zero help from their offense in terms of holding on to the ball for a little bit longer. I don't think you can set this line high enough, man. Give me the Dolphins at 11.5.
See, I'm a huge Dolphins fan, and I think Tua, he should have sat the whole year. I don't know, like, let him get into practice and get some hits in him and stuff. Like, he shouldn't have been hit for the first time in a game. I don't know, but that's just me. I think Fitzpatrick is doing really good too. So, and like, he's learning a lot from Fitzpatrick. It's not like Fitzpatrick's not a guy that can teach Tua stuff. So he's been around in the league for a long time, and he's a very smart dude. One of my favorite bets this week, I already kind of talked about the Patriots and Chargers, how I love that game. I love the over. It's sitting at 47.5 right now. We have two defenses that are kind of underwhelming this season. So I think this is a game that the total is too low. We've seen some of these games kind of go up throughout the week. Cleveland, Tennessee, Houston's gone up a little bit. But I really like the Patriots and Chargers as far as the over in this one at 47.5. What's up, YouTube chat? See you guys over there chatting in YouTube. Make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button over there. They have not announced Fitzpatrick the starter yet, but it is trending in the direction of Fitzpatrick starting. There was a setback for Tua in practice, I think yesterday, Ian. And so it is definitely looking like Fitzpatrick is going to start. We won't get news on that until probably Saturday or even Sunday morning.
Of course. Yeah, no, it's not confirmed yet, but I do think it is certainly trending that direction. So, look, when they originally took Tua out against the Broncos, they said it wasn't an injury-based thing. Flores was like, we got to hold him accountable. Like, well, what are you talking about, man? If you're trying to hold him accountable for performance, you never should have made the switch in the first place. Seems like kind of a disconnect between what the front office and what the coaching staff wants to do. But, hey, we just want Fitzpatrick out there for this week because, again, I am anticipating a massacre against this Bengals team.
Yeah, and, I don't know, man. Let Flores do his thing. I've hated on a lot of coaches, but man, let Flores do his thing. He's doing a great job in Miami.
That turnaround on defense in 1 year, man, he's a great coach. Absolutely. It's not on him to develop the
everything.
Yeah, it's not him. Yeah, but
Ian, it's just like you see teams play for coaches all the time, and the Miami Dolphins are definitely playing for Flores. The New York Jets are not playing for Adam Gase.
That's right. You even see with the Giants a little bit more so going into their bye. It was a team that was at least playing hard. Didn't quite see that same unit last week, but yeah, to your point, man, like absolutely, there are certain teams that you can tell just try harder than other ones at this point in the year.
Let's talk quarterbacks here. What's kind of standing out to you as far as cash games go?
Man, you talked about Cam Newton before. I think he's probably the cheapest one we can really try to hang our hat on. You know, him and Derek Carr are sitting there, but I'm going to try to be paying up if I can. Now, it's tough. I've been trying to, build my first main cash lineup of the week. I really want to get Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams in there because we have literally seen one stinker against Tampa Bay Buccaneers where, Rodgers was really getting thrown off his game because of that. Devontae only had six catches, 61 yards. And every other game this year that Devontae wasn't hurting. So we also had that Lions game. The man scored a touchdown. Aaron Rodgers has just been playing absolutely lights out football. So it's like the easiest stack I think we have this week because, Devontae, you look at all these top wide receivers and they all have like fairly tough shadow matchups. Devontae's facing Darius Slay, Metcalf, James Bradbury, Keenan Allen, Stephon Gilmore. Hopkins has Ramsey on him. So it's very tough for all these guys to, I think, hit their higher end range of outcomes. But for Devontae, man, we just watched what the Eagles' strategy was holding down Metcalf. You're really going to put Darius Slay in single coverage on someone like Metcalf. I think we see the same strategy on Devontae Adams, and that's not going to go well, man, because I don't think there's any cornerback that can hang with Devontae, particularly when you add in his mind meld chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. So I would like to set up the majority of my cash game lineups with Rodgers and Devontae. I think there's a lot of, more options for GPP. Trubisky versus the Lions. All the guy does is throw for 3 touchdowns against the Lions. Just realized I think he's one bad first quarter pick, away from being benched. Also, Ryan Tannehill and company versus the Browns. Again, a lot of game stack options there we've talked about. And then also, maybe the Fitzpatrick boom week with Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki. I like this. I like the Dolphins score a lot of points. It would make sense if it goes through their passing game. So GPP really opens it up, man. But I'm struggling to get a cash game QB. I thought about going naked with Taysom Hill. I don't know, man. I want to get Rodgers and Devontae, but curious on your thoughts about who to kind of set yourself up here for 50-50s and stuff.
I didn't hear you cut off on me.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, I'm curious who you're thinking about building the cash game lineup around at QB, because for me, I'm just still not quite sure. Again, I want to get to Rodgers so I can get that Devontae stack, but I don't know. It's tough, man.
I think, honestly, I'm kind of debating on Cam Newton, Ryan Fitzpatrick, or going all the way down to Baker Mayfield. I think it's definitely going to be determined more on like what opens up at running back and wide receiver as far as injuries go, but it's, man, again, like I'm having a hard time not liking Cam. I think a lot of people are going to play Trubisky this week more than like what we have him projected at. I think you can make an argument for like Deshaun Watson. You can always make an argument for Russell Wilson in cash games. Like those guys are staples. It's a really interesting like week in tournaments. We have a YouTube chat question. Any Mike Glennon shares in GPP? Like we knew he was going to come out and chuck it. He definitely came out and chucked it.
He played well, but no, I'm not going back to the well here. No, can't do it. If we get Chark and Conley back, maybe we can go with Chark a little bit. I'm not sure on their practice status and what it's looking like going to the game. But we saw this with Jake Luton too. His first game, he came out looking pretty good as well. Credit to Glennon for doing so. And as long as these quarterbacks can help James Robinson keep doing his thing, that's kind of my only expectation for him. This is still an awful team. And I think expecting Glennon to really play as well as he did 2 weeks in a row, probably a little bit too much. But you know what? There's no such thing as a bad GPP dart throw. So from that perspective, okay.
I'll use his pieces. Like Chark, he's off the injury report, so he'll be back. Like, but like Robinson's been fantastic, and we'll talk about running backs in a second. But like, I don't mind it because I definitely like the Minnesota side of this game, Dalvin Cook, and we talked about some of these pass catchers. So, definitely will play some of the pieces. But is there anybody that's like really standing out to you as far as tournaments go?
Yeah, I like the Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick might be the move in cash is a decent point. But yeah, maybe paying up for Russ against this Giants squad, man. Colt McCoy, if he's going to be out there. There was a point last week where when Daniel Jones was already out, Colt McCoy was in there. And it was like a ho-hum, 2nd and 10, midfield, 8 minutes left or something. And Jason Garrett legitimately called a quarterback sweep for Colt McCoy, like unironically. I don't know what the hell they're planning on doing this offense, but they haven't been able to throw the ball all year long, really. The only kind of fantasy upside we've seen from Daniel Jones has been his rushing ability. So I just think that this could be a situation where the Seahawks, they've actually been pretty good at the line of scrimmage, particularly since they've had Jamal Adams back, really just running around, playing more of like more like a linebacker than a safety. But I really think that Seahawks are going to be able to stop this Giants run game. And I think the Giants passing game might be bad enough to not even be able to take advantage of this matchup. So it could be a situation where we see Russ and company go absolutely nuts against a good Giants defense. But I think when Russ and Metcalf and Lockett are firing on all cylinders, nobody can really stop them.
Switch it over to running back here. Looking at running back, I think like everybody will be trying to play Dalvin Cook or James Robinson this week. You know, we're seeing a lot of ownership on James Robinson already. What do you like your running back?
Yeah, I was trying to go, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, maybe Team Jam him in, throw back to, David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell from a few years ago. But I do think it's very tough to kind of get both those guys in there with the lack of, higher end, cheaper options out receivers. So, yeah, I think, you pick one of them. I'm leaning a little bit more towards Henry over Dalvin Cook. I just think that, there's a situation where we could see this Vikings team continue to go to the air. They've had so much success with it in past weeks. Dalvin Cook, even though he's healthy, he's had a couple injury scares. Like, I don't know. It's not the matchup they need to necessarily give him 30 plus rush attempts in. Hey, I know he can do a ton with it, and he probably only needs 15 rush attempts to really make his way into the end zone a time or two against the Jaguars team. But I just think Cook versus Henry, I kind of want the guy that's going to be in a little bit more competitive game potentially. With James Robinson, man, it's just kind of the same thing where I'm worried about what happens if they really, really fall behind. And Robinson, like to his credit, I think last week, they didn't even have Chris Thompson or Dare Ogunbowale active. So it was James Robinson on first, second, third down pretty much throughout the entire game. But it's just tough for me to go up to Robinson when I got Eckler sitting there $200 cheaper. And, he is truly the most game script independent back in the entire league. Should have had a touchdown last week. And even though he didn't, 14 freaking catches. It's hard to complain too much about that, particularly in a full point per reception format like Draftkings. So currently I'm thinking one of, Henry or Cook, leaning Henry, and then give me Eckler. And then also sliding down the scale, man. I think the big question is, do you want to go with David Montgomery or Devontae Booker? Maybe both, but I just think with Montgomery, this Bears, and one of the things we looked at in the Mismatch Manifesto yards before contact, the Lions have an awful defense, but the Bears have an awful offensive line. They are the second worst offensive line in the league, only ahead of the Jets in terms of yards before contact per rush. So that's why we see Montgomery always actually surprisingly at the top of these broken tackle metrics, because the guy usually has to break a tackle or two just to get back in the line of scrimmage. So he's been a volume-based RB2 ever since Tariq Cohen went down. It's ugly. We don't care how he gets the fantasy points, and I get it. Home against a middling Lions defense. I understand why he's chalky at this price, but it just seems like one of these trap plays. I'm not sure the ceiling is as high as it is for someone like Booker, who I think is in an even better matchup potentially in a much, much, much better offense.
So I will say this. Montgomery might be one of the best tournament fades on the slate, but in cash games, I do think
that's fair.
His floor to ownership is worth playing. He's just so cheap, man. He's so cheap. The Detroit run defense is really bad, like we've mentioned a few times. So the Chicago Bears offensive line is bad too. But with Tariq Cohen out too, you have to kind of think that the snaps will be there. They have been there. So you add in no Tariq Cohen, and you're not really worried about Ryan Nail taking work. This is a dude that played 89% of the snaps last week. So overall, I think David Montgomery in cash games is fine. If you want to fade him in tournaments, go for it. I'm not going to talk you out of it. I think that there's a lot of options in tournaments that you could be different with in that range. We have David Johnson coming back against Colts. Kareem Hunt's in that range. He's a guy that can score 2 touchdowns and really crush David Montgomery. So I like the Eckler call. If you're not going Keenan Allen or Herbert in cash games or whatever, I definitely think you can play our boy Austin Eckler in tournaments. This is an interesting tournament slate as far as running backs go, because Nick Chubb, he's not going to have a ton of ownership. Aaron Jones is not going to have a ton of ownership. Alvin Kamara at $7K against Atlanta is not going to have a ton of ownership. So there's some high-end running backs that have massive ceilings in any matchup that are going to kind of go overlooked here, Ian.
Yeah, I think Kamara at $7K is someone in tournament, so you can definitely feel good about it. Again, it's been freaking criminal what Taysom Hill has done to this guy's receiving volume. 1 catch for -2 yards, come on. But Sean Payton, not an idiot. He knows that they want to get why why would they pay Cook $75 million? They didn't plan on using him more than this. So as annoying as this 2-game sample is, and, it's fair that we can't project him anywhere near, the likes of, Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry, whereas he was the overall RB1, undisputed here this time last month. So it's tough, but in this matchup and in a game where the Saints are popping in terms of just yards before contact combined against this middling Falcons defense, and the Falcons offense have all sorts of trouble. Hey, how many games are we going to see the Saints, win by double digits and not have Alvin Kamara get a solid performance with that? So it's a play where, in cash, okay, no, I'm staying with Eckler. I think he has a much higher receiving floor at this point, but pivoting off Eckler, pivoting off James Robinson right down there to Kamara, I think makes a ton of sense in tournaments. And also one guy like Myles Gaskin, man, if he's going to be back in action at 5,900, we're talking about a true 3-down RB home freaking 11.5-point favorite against the Bengals defense. I don't think we'll be able to slow down this Dolphins offense at all, as we've been referencing. So if you want to go around, Fitzpatrick, Parker, Gesicki, okay, there's only so many Dolphins you can squeeze in the one lineup after all. But I do think Gaskin is one of these rare running backs where they truly have a 3-down role. Will he get that in his first game back coming off into reserve? It's up for interpretation. We don't know, but that is probably why his ownership is as low as it is. And at 5,900, it's very easy to get there in most lineups. So this is another situation where we can get off of Montgomery Booker at a similar price range, potentially help us out in those tournament formats.
One of the tournament flyers that I want to throw out there to get off of Montgomery is Jonathan Taylor. I'm not a huge Jonathan Taylor person, but I will say, I think, this spot is fantastic. Houston, they haven't been able to stop anybody, running game, passing game, anything. So Jonathan Taylor had a really great workload against Green Bay right before being put on the COVID list. So I don't think he actually ever had COVID. He was close contact. So, I think this is a great spot to maybe just be different with a guy like Jonathan Taylor. Ahmed might not play either for the Dolphins. So Gaskin really might have that 3-down role. These guys are excellent pivots off of chalk, David Montgomery in tournaments.
Yeah, real quick, 2 more guys I like in that range a little bit. Talk about the Patriots, man. Damian Harris at 5,200, James White at 5K. We're just not seeing, any sort of, price increase. I would just say, if you want to go with Cam Newton, you don't necessarily have to go with Jacoby Myers or one of these wide receivers as a stacking partner. You can go with a James White, even a Damian Harris and Cam. I mean, I would say pick one or the other there. Harris obviously isn't catching passes, but, Cam Newton, James White, or if you just want to go with Damian Harris, maybe the Patriots defense, man. I was just looking at the lower cost defenses. Obviously, we want to save money there if we can on a weekly basis. Jaguars are awful. Jets are awful. Giants, good, but they're facing the Seahawks. That sucks. Same thing with the Eagles facing the Packers. Bengals are awful. The Patriots, I think, are the worst defense. That I agree with you. They are not the same world beater we saw in past years, but they've had Gilmore back. They've been playing a little bit better ball lately. And, they're facing Justin Herbert, who has played fantastic this year. He's still been a little bit prone to turnover-worthy plays here and there. And I think, like any rookie quarterback, we got to realize that there is, a potential floor when you're facing someone like Bill Belichick.
I think wide receiver this week, outside of Brandon Cooks is going to be massive chalk on this slate. But outside of him, we're going to see really spread out ownership. What do you like here at wide receiver?
Yeah, I think you said it, man. I don't know if there's going to be anyone else really over 20% or something like that. There's options all over the place to differentiate things a little bit. I think if you want to just move up the pricing a little bit to try to get away from Brandon Cooks, I mean, Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods sitting there at 61 and 5,900. I mean, Cardinals defense that, look, we're probably going to see Patrick Peterson on Robert Woods. The only time Patrick Peterson has looked good over the past 2 years have been when he's been shadowing DK Metcalf. And I don't even think it's necessarily what he's done to Metcalf. I think it's Russell Wilson just kind of refraining from testing that matchup based on having played with Peterson for the past decade and kind of maintaining more respect than he should. So I don't think really anyone in this Cardinals secondary can guard Kupp or Woods. Hey, do we see more of a run-first centric game plan out of the Rams? Potentially, but Jared Goff has been throwing the ball a little bit more in recent weeks. So, I think going with those guys can make some level of sense. And if we do want to save some money and, try to get up some of these running backs, I do think there are some viable options under 4K. Rashad Perryman at 3,900, and Denzel Mims at 4,100. We were worried about having Sam Darnold come back because we've seen him feed Jameson Crowder so much over the past 2 seasons. Sammy Darnold, first game with all 3 wide receivers, only scored 3 points against the Dolphins. That was not good. But we did see him have his highest single game average target depth ever of his career. He was much more willing to throw downfield to Perryman and Mims than I thought. I think either one of those guys is fine to, kind of just help give you that lower cost option. And then finally, Kiki Cutie at 3,500. Look, he's someone that when the original what was it? When the original Cobb injury happened, I was not on Cootie at all. The difference was, he was the number 3 option in this offense. When he has past success in 2018, he was number 2 option. But now we take away Fuller and Cobb. All of a sudden, Keke Coutie's Deshaun Watson's number 2 pass game option. So he is a guy that we have seen, get the double-digit receptions, 100+ yards. Been a little bit since he's done so, but I think Cootie and we'll talk about tight ends a little bit, but Cootie and Jordan Akins, again, I think that Watson is so good. He's going to still be putting up numbers. Someone else is going to be getting those. I think Cootie has pretty much as good a chance as anybody.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And like, if you just one of my biggest issues with paying up for Devontae Adams in cash games this week, and like you could do it any week that you want. Devontae Adams, especially in like one-on-one coverage, if you're expecting that, the matchup definitely sets up for him to have a lot of one-on-one. Like, I will take Devontae Adams against whoever we think the best corner is, and I will still take Devontae Adams in a 1v1. So, my issue this week is just look at the mid-range. We have Cooper Kupp, we have Robert Woods, we have Brandon Cooks, we have Devontae Parker. Julio practiced and felt good today. He's way too cheap if he ends up playing, even in this tough matchup. Like Allen Robinson against Detroit, Justin Jefferson, like Thielen is 7,300. Like all of these options, Ian. And this is one of those weeks where, like, when you're building tournament lineups, you're definitely going to be correlating a lot because there's not like standout wide receivers. Especially even if you look at Cooks, like,
yeah,
Cooks is great for cash games, but do I really want to play like a chalk Cooks? Not part of like a game stack or correlation type of play. So there are a lot of and you like Sterling Shepard's one of my favorite tournament plays. Nelson Aguilar is in that range. If we do expect DeAndre Hopkins to get the treatment this weekend, like maybe Christian Kirk finally bust out this week. So
I like that. There's
a lot of that's my only problem with like Devontae Adams and cash this week. There's so many good mid-range options. That is this a week we go Devontae Adams and like one of these cheap guys, or is this a week we just take 3 of these like mid-range guys and hope that they all do what they're supposed to do?
No, yeah, and I think honestly, as we've gone there throughout this episode today, I've gotten more and more off of the Rodgers Devontae stack. They're going to put up numbers, we know this, but I do think when you go look at Fitzpatrick and Devontae Parker, man, like it's just such a cheaper version of a stack that could feasibly give us a similar amount of targets. Fitzpatrick loves feeding this guy, and against a worse, I think Bengals secondary compared to the Eagles, it makes sense. Plus, we can then throw in Mike Gesicki there too as well. So completely different Dolphins offense. I'm praying that Tua doesn't randomly get this start because it's going to take away everything I've been preaching about here. But a lot of opportunities in that Dolphins Bengals game potentially.
You mentioned we last week we went into like depth of like talking about like Michael Pittman. He was someone that we like brought up on the show, and we're like, we think the talent's there, but like you have to love the matchup for Pittman here. He's quickly becoming like the high volume target guy for Rivers, and we've seen in the past when like Rivers locks in on somebody, the upside is there. So I think Michael Pittman in this matchup, he stands out. He's cheap. You mentioned Perryman. He's one of the cheap guys that I have on my list this week. If you're like me and Ian, like we're definitely getting on this like Miami train, all of the options to run it back, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, all these guys are super cheap. Listen, the Miami defense has definitely been better this season, but they still allow some plays where you can definitely run it back with some of these cheaper guys.
You see DraftKings priced AJ Green at 3,100. I'm not even saying it's wrong, but just seeing AJ Green, as a full-time starter at 3,100 is just wild to see. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to get behind too many people in that Bengals offense, but yeah, I mean, there's options all over the place, man. I would also say, T.Y. Hilton at 4,300. This Houston secondary has already been, not anyone's idea of a good unit throughout the year, and now you take away the number 1 cornerback in Bradley Roby. That's not good, man. So yeah, Pittman, Hilton, it's normally a crowded passing game in with the Colts, and that was the main point from last week. It was just that Pittman's someone that he's gotten the bulk of his plays kind of on these uncovered crossers, and just we see week to week a different tight end or a different running back or a different receiver leading the way. But now that we have this just dream matchup where I think we're all expecting Philip Rivers and company to have plenty of efficiency, this is the type of spot I'm way more willing to take chances on these wide receivers.
Some tight end news since we are shifting over to tight ends. As we've been doing the show, Jonnu Smith ruled out for Tennessee. I think that actually And that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Not only does it I don't think it makes a huge difference for Derrick Henry, but it definitely makes a difference in this passing game. It gives us a potential cheap tight end to look at in a game that is projected to be really close and a lot of scoring. So Anthony Frickster, I did not expect to be talking about Anthony Frickster when we started here, but we'll start with him. Ian, he's 2.5K. He's going up against Cleveland. It's hard not to like the price, the matchup. This is a team that allows the second most fantasy points to tight ends, first most over the last 4 weeks. Like, none of us want to play Anthony Frickster, but man, it definitely sets up for a nice little cheap tight end option here.
2,500, man. It's hard to get away from. And the problem is though, man, like I'm looking at the snap rates from last week now. Like he should be their primary receiving option, but both Jonnu Smith and Jeff Swaim played like a ton, double the snaps that Ferkser did play last week. So he had that 100-yard game earlier in the year, and we've seen in the past, I think when they feel like leaning on someone else in the passing game, it is Ferkser over Swaim, but it's going to be a tricky situation with these targets. I'd say he's definitely someone in cash games that we can lean on and kind of take that free square. I think a lot of people are going to be at it, but tight end in tournaments, it's been tricky all year long. I still think someone like Mike Gesicki is probably going to give you a little bit higher ceiling. Even if this takes away ownership from Jordan Akins, maybe that's going to be the good thing, because the Texans, Deshaun Watson is like 4th or 5th in the entire league in terms of just dropbacks with 2 tight ends on the field over the past 2 years. That's going to be even higher now without Fuller and Cobb in the fold. So I think Akins would be more or less playing a full-time role out there. He's one of these tight ends where it's not the kind of dad bod, just catch the ball and fall down. Akins actually has some explosiveness to him, some yak ability. So I think Akins is someone I still like a lot. And Gesicki too is more or less a slot wide receiver out there for him. They were playing him like an actual tight end with Tua under center. Again, it's a totally different offense with Tua and without. But now over these, having Fitzpatrick back there, we have seen his role get back to playing in the slot and out wide. I think that's also probably because Preston Williams has been out too. But either way, Gesicki and Parker this week, love it.
Even if we want to go up to like Waller, I think he's definitely one of the safer options. We pew-pewed on Evan Ingram last week, and he had actually a good game for the first time all year. Austin Hooper is an option in that same Cleveland-Tennessee game. Jordan Akins getting a lot of love from the industry from what I've seen already. Like, he's cheap, but I feel like a lot of the Jordan Akins love is going to switch over to Frickster now, and for good reason. Is there anything standing out to you for tournaments at tight end this week?
Yeah, I think paying up for Waller could make sense. To your point, we're talking about the potential for the bounce back, performance from this Raiders passing game as a whole. Yeah, credit to Ingram for looking good, but now he's missing his quarterback, so who knows what's going to be going on there. I would say maybe don't completely sleep on these Lions pass catchers. It's a worse overall offense without Kenny Golladay, but Marvin Jones is someone that throughout this year, but Kenny Galladay's sideline has been good for a touchdown almost every single game. And Hawkinson, I believe, is like the tight end 4 or 5 overall on the season. So he's been putting up numbers. Last guy I would say, Robert Tonyan at just 3,700. Look, Rodgers loves this guy. He's been feeding him, a good 4 or 5 targets per game. Not the hugest ceiling, but hey, he's still one of these few tight ends out there that I think we can feel, reasonably good about projecting him for 50+ yards and a score. So I'd say Tonyan could be that mid-price guy where, if you don't want to go all the way down to Akins, but you also don't want to go all the way up to Waller, you're still getting a little bit of that upside and a great offense, even if it's not, the cheapest guy you can afford.
So for tight ends, for tournaments, I think, kind of the whole thing we've been talking about a few of these games, it seems like more and more, but I think Trey Burton is super interesting for tournaments this week. Going back to this Colts Houston game, like Trey Burton is a legit touchdown threat every week. And this is a guy that can score 2 touchdowns in any week. He's not going to crush targets or anything like that, but he's the guy that is legit a red zone threat in this Colts offense. So listen, you give me 10 to 15 points at tight end, most of the time I'm super happy. So I think Trey Burton is someone that you can definitely look at to maybe potentially make your Cooks teams that you're running with Cooks and Watson just different. A lot of people will probably run that back with a running back, or they'll run it back with a Pittman. You can run it back with a Burton just to be different. It also gets you off of Frickster is going to be chalk now. It just kind of switches it up a little bit to make it very different. And then Dallas Goedert's always an interesting tournament play. Even with Ertz coming back, it sounds like he's coming back anyway. So
Yeah.
Anything else for tight end?
I like the Burton call. Dude, this Colts freaking tight end room. If one or two of these guys get hurt, like then we can really fire it up with confidence. So it's definitely more of a tournament play because we know Mo Alley Cox is probably gonna be on the field more often. Jack Doyle's gonna be stealing away a target or two as well. But Burton, I don't know what Frank Reich loves so much about this guy, but he does. And we even see him. He's like vultured like 2 goal line carries from Jonathan Taylor this year. So Burton and like Logan Thomas are the only 2 tight ends in the league that we can like actually maybe expect like a random rush or pass attempt from. So he's got that, extra little card in his pocket, I guess, if he wants to pull it. So yeah, no, Burton, especially in, Houston centric stacks, I think makes a lot of sense.
I don't really have anything else for tight end. I will say before we move on to defense and finish out, if you guys haven't already, the single entry contest over there on FanDuel for the single entry series, this is the last week. We have a $5, a $33, and $100 buy-in. Top 4 scores count for each buy-in tier. Top 2 finishers will advance to the 6-man 20K final. Even if you haven't been playing it, these tournaments are some of the best structured GPP tournaments out there, especially on FanDuel. So definitely take advantage of that. Man, it's going to be close in some of these. Like there's a couple of people that are really battling it for these. I'm not one of them, Ian. I've played in them every week, but I am not one of them. Let's talk defense before we get out of here. It is setting up as a week that we can almost kind of pay up at defense a little bit to take a floor in cash games. What do you like at defense this week?
Yeah, if we got Ferkser out there, man, that sounds good. Going with if we're getting up to Dalvin Cook and we're kind of rolling with that cash lineup, I think it makes sense to stack him with the Minnesota defense. But at the same time, though, if we want to go a little bit lower to Las Vegas, save 100 and kind of pair them up with Booker. So yeah, to your point, I mean, I think there's plenty of defenses above 3K we can feel good about. But also, if we want to go under, I mean, I still think there are some decent opportunities out there, and particularly with that New England defense. It's no disrespect to Herbert or anything, but I just think that still they're a well-coached unit, and against a rookie QB, and more, it's not even on Herbert, it's more the Chargers offensive coaching staff. I don't really have expectations that they're necessarily going to put him in the best position to succeed. So I think that makes sense. I mean, Detroit, they freaking suck, man, but they're facing, the league's single worst quarterback room pretty much with the Chicago Bears right now. So, hey, maybe they get the, post-Patricia bump. And, sometimes it just comes down to getting, that defensive or special team score. So I would say, if you are trying to go the bottom of the barrel here with defense, try to do it against a bad QB like the Lions versus the Bears, or try to do it with at least, not an awful defense, which is the Patriots, even if they haven't been quite as good as we've seen in past years.
Yeah, I don't know, man. The 3 top defenses, the Dolphins, as far as price, defense, the Dolphins, the Packers, the Saints, all 3 of those teams are super strong. All 3 of those are super strong. I think if you want to save some money, I think the Bears against Detroit is definitely something. But I don't hate the Jets. I really don't. I think they're a really interesting tournament play on this slate. Vegas is going to throw. It only takes 1 pick 6 to get you there. And at 2.1K, if you are building a Devontae Adams team, take a shot at the Falcons defense or the Jets defense, or I would even say you could potentially take a shot on the Bengals defense if this whole running back situation might be very interesting for Miami, right? Because if Gaskin doesn't get activated, Washington and Ahmed are already both doubtful. Breida got forced from practice from an illness today. So if they put him in that COVID thing, it's Friday, he can't get 3 tests Saturday, Sunday. So he would be out. It would be Lard and gosh, who's the other guy? I can't even think. It's a Bowden, something like that.
Yeah, Lynn Bowden. He's like a wide receiver hybrid.
Yeah, so Fitzpatrick throwing 45 times. There's a pick or 2 in there. So I don't know. I think defense never matters for DFS. It's kind of whoever just fits. But I do think if you are playing cash games, I think the Bears, the Saints, the Packers, the Dolphins, any of those top end defenses, now that we're getting some value opening up, it's not going to be hard to fit those guys in.
I looked at the Jets long and hard before this. I wasn't brave enough to go out there. I'm happy you did. I do think, against, I don't know that Derek Carr is going to have that bad of a game again, but they are going back across the country. And, it's Jets again. I think they're poorly coached enough that the Raiders are going to have a nice bounce back spot here, but 2,100, probably a couple hundred too cheap.
They shut down Devontae Booker and Carr is throwing more. Listen, all it takes is 1. And I feel people put too much like pressure on defense. Like you can play just about any defense any week that you want to. Like what was it a couple weeks ago? The Falcons got crushed, but their defense still put up like 19 fantasy points. Like that's what happens, dude. Like, you know, it's what happened. Cincinnati last week against the Giants. Like they ran back one of the plays, and it's such a position that has so many range of outcomes that whoever fits, like you can make an argument for really any defense on any week. So like that, and I talk about this all the time on podcasts, and I think like just whoever fits. Now there are safer defense for cash games. Sure, you could have paid up for the Saints last week, but in tournaments, I fully faded them. Don't care. They were too expensive. So, Ian, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I think that's going to do it, man. Yeah, as you know, like you said at the opening of the show, like everything can kind of be flipped on its head based on how some of these injury news comes out on Friday and Saturday. So everyone out there, make sure, you know, you're paying attention to that as well, in addition to what we just said. But best of luck in week 13, everybody. Good talking to you as always, man.
Really quick before we get out of here, Irv Smith just got ruled out. Do you go back to the well on Kyle Rudolph here?
It's a fine option. I think he's kind of in that group of guys we talked about. He's certainly a viable option without Irv Smith playing a full-time role, getting a solid chunk of targets. But I wouldn't say he's like someone we need to all of a sudden lock into our lineups now.
I will say this before we roll out. With all these like cheap tight ends like opening up, some of these expensive tight ends are going to be really low owned in tournaments. So definitely try to take advantage of that. That's going to wrap it up here for the Pro Football Focus show on Rotogrinders. He is Ian Hart, and I'm Stevie TVFL. See y'all next week.